I'm Chickpea, and in this video, I'm going to show you what I carried on my first thru hike on the Pacific Crest Trail, what I loved, what I hated, what I kept, what I threw away. So stick around, let's dive in.
When I started researching for the PCT, I had no idea what kind of backpack to use. I went with the Gossamer Gear Mariposa, and I'm so glad I did. It's super lightweight, but the supported frame made it sturdy enough for heavier carries in the Sierra when I had to pack extra gear like a bear can, ice axe, and crampons. As you can see, this one's brand new, in pristine condition, almost too pretty to use. I tested the Gossamer Gear G420 frameless pack on the Colorado Trail just to see what the hype was all about, and I didn't love it. I'll definitely be sticking to frame packs for future thru hikes. Again, I had no idea what I was doing with my sleep system, but I went with a down quilt since they were so popular and I was really happy with it. It was versatile, I could use it like a blanket on warm nights or close it up on cold ones. I do regret not adding a draft collar for extra warmth, and I still don't think I'm using all the straps and clips to their full potential.
I'm on one side of the tent and my sleeping pad is on the other side of the tent, so.
For shelter, I started with the Gossamer One trekking pole tent and loved it. When I first got it, I actually thought I'd ordered the wrong product. It looked more like a tarp than a tent. It took me a few weeks to learn how to pitch it properly on trail, but once I nailed the pole height, it felt like a Taj Mahal inside. Later, I did switch to a freestanding tent when I met Artifact, who had a 2-person REI quarter dome. Honestly, the extra weight is worth it, guys. Way easier to set up, especially after a 30-mile day. And I love being able to pitch the rainfly first and then clip the tent body underneath to keep everything dry. It took me a while to choose a sleeping pad. There are just so many options out there, but I finally went with the Neo Air X-Therm. And you've probably guessed by now my very strict criteria for picking gear. I chose the most popular one. No complaints though, it was super comfortable. For my first time sleeping on the ground outside, I honestly slept like a queen. If anything, it felt a bit too long. I would have preferred a shorter version if possible. This pad is still going strong after the entire PCT, the Colorado Trail, the Sunshine Coast Trail, and most recently, sleeping on the floor at an airport during a long layover. These things are so versatile. Yes, you can stuff your extra clothes into a sack and call it a pillow, or you can just carry an actual pillow. I loved my Nemo Pillow Elite. It inflates in about 4 seconds and gives instant comfort. I did ship it ahead once to test out the ultralight theory, and honestly, I slept surprisingly well with the stuffed sack hack, but then my pillow got stolen, so I stuck with the stuffed sack for the rest of the PCT.
Slept in a parking lot. Pretty good sleep.
You might be noticing a trend here, and you'd be right. I'd never used any of this backpacking gear before my PCT thru hike, and the same goes for the trekking poles. I always thought they were just for the elderly, but turned out to be amazing. They held up my Gossamer One tent, saved my knees on descents, helped with river crossings, and even held my water bladder so gravity could filter my water. Genius. My one true love on trail, sorry Artifact, was Burt's Bees lip balm. I carried 2 at all times because there was no way I was living without it. One stayed in my shoulder strap pocket for quick access. That pocket also turned out to be the perfect home for my Sony ZV-1 camera. This is such an amazing invention. I honestly don't know how I'd hike or even travel without it. It's antimicrobial and quick drying. I could never decide where to clip it on my pack, but most often it lived on my bum bag for easy access. Speaking of bums, this is my poop kit. I carried it in a small, non-transparent Z-Packs dry bag, the perfect spot for all your dirty toilet paper needs. Inside, I had my Deuce of Spades trowel for digging cat holes, and I'll admit I was a big fan of flushable wipes. I also experimented with a backpacking bidet a few times, but let's just say I need to work on my aim. I didn't do a ton of night hiking, but on the rare occasions I needed a headlamp, like those early mornings in the Sierra, I was super happy with my Petzl. Lightweight, reliable, and bright enough to get the job done. I also carried a Joby Gorilla tripod, thinking I'd use it all the time with my camera, but in reality, I only used it in my tent to prop up my phone and watch movies, or in town on 0 days. Team Platypus all the way. This water filter was awesome, and I still use it on all my backpacking trips. I loved that I could backflush it right on trail to keep it flowing, and it paired perfectly with my CNOC 2-liter bladder for heavier water carries, and most of the time I had it connected straight to a smart water bottle in my side pocket. You'll be getting pretty cozy with your water filter at night. Keep it warm in your toe box because if it freezes, the fibers inside can crack, and then you're basically drinking unfiltered water. People often asked how I stayed safe solo hiking as a female, and that was thanks to my Garmin InReach. It tracked my location and gave me the option to contact search and rescue if I ever needed to. Thankfully, I never had to hit that SOS button. My favorite feature, though, was messaging friends on trail. It honestly felt like MSN for hikers. So much fun. But fair warning, shortly after the PCT, I had to toss my Garmin in the trash at the New Delhi airport. Long story, but make sure you research which countries allow satellite devices and which don't. I'll give you a hint, India definitely doesn't. My cork ball was an essential for keeping my body happy, especially rolling out my tired feet at the end of the day. Have you ever told your feet how much you love them? I sure have. I didn't really get what buffs were for until I started the PCT, but they turned out to be the best multi-use item. I always wore mine around my neck, dipped it in streams to cool off on hot days, pulled it over my face for warmth on cold nights, and even used it as a pillowcase for my stuffed sack pillow. I'm obsessed with my Ombraz sunglasses. I'll never go back to regular ones. I love you, Ombraz. I could never be a cold soaker. I looked forward to my warm meals every night way too much. My Toke 750 milliliter cookpot was the perfect size for ramen, and I actually started with a spork, but Artifact convinced me to try a spoon we found in a hiker box in the Sierras, and I never went back. The Pocket Rocket stove held up great even in high altitudes and windy sections. I kept my stove and fuel canister stored inside my pot and the whole setup in my outside pocket so I could grab it fast and start boiling water while setting up camp. Other than my tiny toothbrush and toothpaste in my hip belt, I kept all my toiletries in a little Z-Pack stuff sack. Inside, I had Leuko tape, KT tape, a few Band-Aids, polysporin, and after a nasty reaction to a wasp sting in Northern California, I added Benadryl. I also carried a bunch of extra elastic bands. But my absolute favorite item was the Badger foot balm. I only got one blister the entire trail, and that was because I forgot to put this on the night before. All my electronics lived safely in a Ziploc bag. I carried 3 cables that covered everything: my iPhone, headlamp, Garmin InReach, and Sony camera. My Anker power bank always lasted a full stretch, except for that one time in the Sierra when I forgot to put it in my toe box of my quilt.
3 days left, and 1 bar of battery remains.
For filming, I carried a few SD cards and found that 1 extra camera battery was the sweet spot. Okay, on to what I wore on the PCT. I started out in a Patagonia Capilene sun hoodie. Most hikers I knew had to replace theirs mid-trail, but mine actually lasted the entire PCT. And even though I don't really like pink, apparently I was going for the mountain Barbie vibe with my bright pink Patagonia baggies to match. My secret to avoiding blisters was the Injinji liner and Darn Tough sock combo. Total game changer. I also carried sealskin waterproof socks, which were a lifesaver in the Sierra during a record high snow year. On my hands, I rotated between sun gloves during the day and smart wool gloves on those colder mornings. And then I had my sacred socks. Yes, sacred. Never for hiking, only to be enjoyed after a wet wipe shower, warm and cozy in my tent. I loved my Patagonia barely worn sports bra, and not filmed here is my smart wool underwear. I carried 2 pairs, one for hiking and one for sleeping. My Outdoor Research quick dry cap, and my Patagonia micro puff got the job done for warmth. But if I did it again, I'd choose a down jacket for those colder days. And can someone tell me where you're supposed to tuck that dangling string at the bottom? So I did recently upgrade to a Patagonia down jacket, and wow, slipping it on feels like a warm hug. I went frugal with frog togs and grabbed a youth extra large. The jacket worked great, but the pants were way too tight. I ended up upgrading to Montbell rain pants at 2 Foot Adventures in Julian. Much better choice. I loved having clean, cozy clothes for camp. I started with a DeVold merino thermal hoodie, but swapped it out for a Patagonia Capilene Air hoodie in Mazama before a big snowstorm. And I've been using it ever since. I paired it with the smart wool base layer pants and down booties from Enlightened Equipment. I even wore these booties as gloves while trekking in Nepal. I would say the only downside is they slipped off quite a lot. It would be nice to have a drawstring for these guys. Although on the heavier side, I loved my Morel camp shoes, perfect for river crossings and hanging out at camp, and something clean to wear in town other than smelly trail runners. On the Colorado Trail, I tried lightweight chacos, but I didn't love the toe loop, especially since it made it hard to wear my sacred socks. I tested a few different shoes on trail. I started in Saucony Peregrines, but they wore out really fast and always tore on the corners. In Bishop, I switched to Topos for the Sierra, and then I discovered Hoka Speedgoats. Game over. The wide toe box was perfect for me, and I've never looked back since. Within my first week on the PCT, I ditched my ground sheet. I just didn't see the point of packing away 2 dirty things every morning. My tent was enough. I also started out ambitiously with a Kindle, thinking I'd be reading every night at camp, but the reality was I was way too exhausted to do anything but eat and sleep, so I shipped that home. I even bought black diamond high gaiters thanks to all the fear-mongering about the Sierra snow, and never ended up using them. One item I did love was a silk sleep liner. I lost the first one early on trail, but I repurchased it later and now use it all the time. It keeps my quilt clean and adds a little extra warmth. As previously mentioned, I also experimented with a frameless pack, but I learned pretty quickly I'm a fan of more support. I'll most likely be sticking with my Mariposa 60-liter or another framed pack for future thru hikes. And finally, swapping my trekking pole tent for a freestanding one was a total game changer. No more stressing about where or how to pitch, it always felt solid no matter the terrain. Alrighty, so that's the gear I carried across the PCT, the Colorado Trail, and even the Sunshine Coast Trail. If you're curious about the specifics, I've linked my full written gear list on the trek down below. And just a reminder, there's no such thing as a perfect setup. The best gear is the gear that makes you feel comfortable and confident out there. My hope is this gives you some inspiration, and my best advice is simple. Find what works for you and don't be afraid to adjust along the way. Happy trails!